Good afternoon, boys and girls. My name is Miss Melissa, and I am your host for today. Today, your teacher will be Miss Baker. We look forward to teaching you all we know about fairy tales and how to distinguish fantasy from realistic fiction.
Today's lesson is titled The Emperor's New Clothes. I cannot wait to see what happens in this story. By the end of today's lesson, we will be able to determine the central message or the moral of the story, describe how people feel upon seeing the emperor in his underwear, and describe the illustrations of the spinners, the weavers, and the tailors. Orally predict from illustrations why the emperor might be dressed the way he is. We know that fairy tales are stories that are make-believe. They're made up, and they sometimes feature members of a royal family, like a king or a queen, or a prince or princess, even an emperor. Some of the characters might have magic or do have special powers. Many things that happen in fairy tales are fantasy, and they don't happen in real life. In other words, fairy tales are fiction. Raise your hand if you enjoy listening to fairy tales. Can you recall a fairy tale that begins with "Once upon a time"? What kind of endings do fairy tales usually have? Happy or sad? Can you name any fairy tales that have royal characters or characters with magical powers? Over the next several days, we will share some of our favorite fairy tales with you. So be sure and tune in and join us. Today, our fairy tale is called The Emperor's New Clothes. This story was first written down by a Danish man named Hans Christian Andersen. Has anyone ever heard the word emperor? An emperor is a male ruler of a group of nations called an empire. This story is about the people who work for the emperor. An emperor has many people who serve him, including those who make his clothes. I'm going to show you a royal emperor's hat. And the emperor might look like this. Have you ever seen a picture of an emperor before? Now you have.
Awesome.
Boys and girls, thumbs up if you've ever seen a chart like this before. This is our KWL chart. K is for what I know. W is for what I want to know. And L is for what I've learned. Let's talk about some of the things that we know about fairy tales. Miss Melissa, can you share what you know?
I know that fairy tales are make-believe. They're made-up stories. Fairy tales also begin sometimes with once upon a time, or possibly long ago. And also, fairy tales have characters such as kings and queens and princes and princesses. This one is an emperor.
Can you tell what kinds of things we might want to know about the story?
I personally want to know if the characters will have magic powers. And am I going to learn a lesson from this fairy tale?
Awesome. We're going to talk about some of our vocabulary words that we might hear in this story and the meaning of the words. And I want you to listen carefully when we begin the read aloud so that you can notice every time the word is used in the story. The first word is emperor. Say emperor.
Emperor.
An emperor is a male ruler of an empire. Let's use our bodies and our faces to show what an emperor might look like.
Oh, I like that one. Look at there.
I see.
Awesome. A ruler.
A ruler.
Good job.
The emperor ruled the empire with great power and courage. What is our new word?
Emperor.
Emperor. Terrific. The second word that we will be listening for is curious. Say curious.
Curious.
Curious means the desire to learn more. And in a sentence, you might hear, they were curious to find out who has won the game. Curious. I wonder how we would use our face or our body to show the word curious.
Let's see. I like that one. Great job.
Excellent. What is our new word?
Curious.
Curious. Excellent. And the last word is astonished. Say astonished with me. Astonished. To be astonished means you are greatly surprised or amazed. Show me, boys and girls, astonished.
Oh, those look really good. Look there. Awesome. Great job.
Miss Melissa, what do you think astonished looks like to you?
I'm going to mimic that little girl's.
Wow.
Awesome.
A sentence that uses the word astonished would be, I was astonished by how much he had grown since last year. Now, what is our word?
Astonished.
Astonished. Let's go back through one more time. Emperor, a male ruler of an empire with great power and rank. Curious, having a desire to learn more. And astonished, greatly surprised or amazed. Listen for these words in our story. The title of this story is The Emperor's New Clothes, retold by Hans Christian Andersen. This fairy tale is not true. It is make-believe or fiction. Remember, as we read, that fairy tales often feature a royal character, and in this story, the royal character is an emperor. I want you to take just a second to predict what you think might happen in this story. Listen very carefully to see if your predictions are correct. And we also want to listen to the story to see all of the new words that we've learned so far this morning. Ready for our read aloud?
We're ready.
I can't wait to hear about the emperor.
The Emperor's New Clothes. Many years ago, there was an emperor who loved fine clothes. He did not care for hunting. He did not care for plays or opera. And he was no lover of gourmet food or wine. His only ambition was always to be well dressed. He had a different coat for every hour of the day. He loved to walk about and show off his fancy outfits. One day, two strangers arrived in town. They were swindlers, but they said that they were master weavers from a faraway land. They told the emperor that they could weave the most beautiful cloth in the world. They said that not only was their cloth beautiful, but it was also magical. It was specially woven so that only the most intelligent people could see it. Those who were ignorant could stare at the cloth all day and not see a thing. Astonishing, thought the emperor. I will have these men make me a suit. When it is done, I will figure out who can see it. That way, I will be able to tell which of the men who serve me are intelligent and which are fools. The emperor gave the swindlers a purse filled with gold coins and told them to begin weaving the magic cloth right away. The swindlers set up 2 weaving looms and pretended to be weaving their wonderful cloth. But they had nothing at all on their looms. After a few days, the emperor grew curious to see the cloth. At first, he thought he might check up on the weavers himself. But then he remembered what they had said. Only intelligent people could see the cloth. He was very confident that he was smart. There could be little doubt of that. But what if he was not? What if he could not see the cloth? Just to be on the safe side, he decided to send his prime minister to have a look. "He is very intelligent," said the king. "If he can't see the cloth, I dare say nobody can." The emperor called for the prime minister and sent him to check up on the weavers. The prime minister went to the room and peeked in. The 2 swindlers were working away at their looms. "Oh, Prime Minister," one of the swindlers called out, "you are welcome here. Come in, come in. Come and see the cloth we have produced." The man waved his hand at the empty loom and said, "Isn't it beautiful?" The Prime Minister squinted and he rubbed his head. He did not see any cloth at all, but he did not dare to admit it. That would mean he was a fool, so he pretended to see the cloth. "Yes," said the Prime Minister, "it is most beautiful indeed. I like it very much. Keep up the good work." The Prime Minister turned to leave, but the second swindler called out to him, "Wait, don't go. You must not leave without touching the cloth. I think you will be impressed. We were just saying that it is the softest cloth we have ever created." The Prime Minister hesitated for a moment. Then he said, of course," and walked up to one of the looms. He reached out his hand. He rubbed his fingers together in the area where he thought the cloth must be. He could not feel anything. But he said, "It is very soft indeed. Why, it's lighter than air." "Thank you," said the first swindler. "We are pleased with what we have done, and we are making very good progress too. But we need a little more money for thread and other materials." "Of course you understand." Of course," said the Prime Minister. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a bag of coins. Then he handed the coins to the swindlers. The Prime Minister went back to the emperor and he told him that the cloth was quite lovely and as soft as could be. He said he was confident that the emperor would like it. That was what the emperor had hoped to hear. The next day, he went to have a look for himself. After all, if his prime minister had seen the cloth, surely he could see it too. But when he stepped into the room where the 2 men had set up their looms, the emperor saw nothing on the looms. "This is terrible," he thought. "I don't see anything at all. What can this mean? If the Prime Minister saw the cloth, it must be there. Then why can't I see it? Am I stupid? Am I unfit to be emperor? That would be the most dreadful thing that could happen to me." But out loud he said, "It is magnificent, truly magnificent. Why, I have never seen cloth so lovely." "Shall we go ahead and make you a suit, then, Your Majesty?" "Oh, yes, by all means," said the emperor. You can get my measurements from the royal tailor. The two swindlers sat up late into the night, pretending to work on the suit. They wove more invisible cloth. They cut the air with scissors and stitched the wind with threadless needles. Other noblemen came to inspect the cloth, and all of them pretended to be able to see it, for they did not wish to appear stupid. Soon the whole town was talking about the wonderful cloth in the emperor's new suit. At last, the day came when the emperor was to wear his new clothes in public. The two swindlers presented themselves in the emperor's dressing room at daybreak. "Here's the jacket," said the first swindler, holding up an empty hanger. "And here are the pants," said the other, holding one hand in the air. "What do you think of them?" All of the emperor's men agreed that the new clothes were splendid. The emperor took off his clothes, and the two swindlers pretended to help him put on the make-believe garments. "Slip your right leg in here, your majesty." "That's it. Now your left leg." "Good. Now I must tell you, these pants are not like regular pants. The fabric is so light and airy that it feels like you are wearing nothing at all. But that is the beauty of them." The man helped the emperor into his imaginary clothes. Then they led him to this looking glass. "How handsome you look, your majesty," said one of the swindlers. All of the courtiers nodded their head in agreement. The emperor marched out of the dressing room and made his way out of the palace, followed by many advisors and servants. He marched down the main street of town, with soldiers and bodyguards surrounding him on all sides. The streets were lined with great crowds. Everyone had heard about the emperor's new clothes, made of magic fabric that only the wise could see. "How lovely the emperor's new clothes are," one man said. "And how well they fit him," added a woman. None of them would admit that they could see nothing. The emperor marched through the street bursting with pride, showing off his brilliant new suit to everyone in the land. Much to his surprise, they all seemed to see what he could not. And so he was not going to be the one to tell them. Just then, a young child stepped out of the crowd and cried out, "He hasn't got anything on!" A hush fell over the crowd. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. Then everyone began to whisper, "The child is right. The emperor isn't wearing a thing." Then people began to giggle and laugh as they cried out, "He hasn't got anything on!" At last, the emperor knew he had been tricked. He tried to march back to the palace as proudly as ever, but he was blushing from head to toe, as everyone could plainly see.
Now, boys and girls, we'll have a few questions about the story you just heard. Be sure to answer in complete sentences and try to restate the question in your response. Let's think back. What do the characters in the story pretend to know or see? That's right. They pretend that the emperor has on new clothes. Why do you think they pretended to see that?
Great job. They didn't want to be called a fool.
And so everybody went along with the trick with the emperor. The emperor finds great pleasure in wearing new clothes. Who makes the emperor's new magical suit?
Great job. The weavers, the new tailors, they pretended to be tailors, made the new magical suit.
They called those people a certain word. What was it?
They have it. A
There you go.
tailor.
A tailor. What do they promise the emperor about these new clothes that intrigues him, that makes him curious?
Great job. They tell them that the threads are magic, that the clothes are woven with magic. Awesome job, boys and girls.
And also, you had to be very smart to see the clothes. Are the people able to see his clothing?
She said, no, that is correct. No, they were not able to see the clothes at all.
And it tricked everyone.
Yes.
Who notices, of all the crowds, who notices that the emperor has on nothing except his underwear and that they've all been tricked?
Great job. It was a child that noticed. Awesome answer, boys and girls. It was a child in the crowd that noticed the emperor didn't have anything on.
Do you think he was the first one to see this?
No, I agree with them. No, he was not the first.
But he was the first one brave enough to admit it. How do you know that this story was a fairy tale?
Boys and girls, do you remember what we talked about earlier? What are some of the things you heard in the story? What about the characters?
There was a royal character.
There was a royal character. Who was the royal character? Correct, the emperor. Good job.
Now we're going to do an activity called Think, Pair, Share. You can find a partner at home for this activity. Miss Melissa will be my partner. It can be your mom or dad, or your sister or brother, or just a friend that's at your house. I am going to ask you a question. Then I will give you a minute to think about the question. Then I will ask you to turn to your partner and share your answer. Ready? Do you think there is a lesson to be learned from this story? If so, what is it? Think and share.
Oh, I hear great answers.
Me too.
Great job. I'm going to share one of the answers that I just heard. I heard one of the students say that we should always tell the truth no matter what, and that we should be able to speak up.
I think so too. Sometimes it's hard to do that, but it's always best to tell the truth. We have a little word work, and then it'll be time for us to say goodbye. In the read aloud, you heard, after a few days, the emperor grew curious to see the cloth. Miss Melissa, you want to use the wand to show curious? Curious means a desire to learn more. Here is a sentence. Reed was very curious about the bug on his front door. It had a purple body and orange legs. So curious means he was interested. He wanted to know. Have you ever been curious about an animal or anything that you might see that you don't know a lot about? Try to use curious in a complete sentence.
I heard a great sentence. The sentence that I heard, boys and girls, from you was, I was curious to know what the emperor's clothes were going to look like.
What's the word we've been talking about?
Curious.
Curious means a desire to learn more about something. Raise your hand if you like to draw. I see lots of hands out there.
Lots of hands.
We are going to do a drawing activity. You're going to get a piece of paper and pencil, and in a few minutes you're going to draw a picture after we say goodbye, and you're going to share your drawing and write on the back a sentence about it. Miss Melissa, can you share what you might draw?
I would draw a box as if I'm looking into a box with, because I want a puppy for Christmas. I would draw me looking into a box with a puppy, hopefully inside.
Great. So you can share your picture with your family or friends at home. So boys and girls, what we learned about today on our KWL chart, there really is a lesson to be learned, and some of the characters do have magical powers.
Great job, Miss Baker. Thank you for joining us today. All rights and credits from this lesson belong to Core Knowledge Language Arts. Thank you for letting us publicly share these.